Okay, boomer, queer Gen Z considers how to be seen and heard inside the LGBTQ plus community. Research has shown that typical Gen Zer is a self-driver who deeply cares about others, strives for a diverse community, and is highly collaborative and social, values flexibility, relevance, authenticity, and non-hierarchical leadership. And while dismayed about inherent issues like climate change, has a pragmatic attitude about the work that has to be done to address those issues. They are often seen by older generations, especially baby boomers, as whiny or entitled, when in fact they're just outspoken about the issues in society and are aware of the fact that they were born into an economy where financial independence is extremely unlikely for many. Tonight's anchors are perfect examples of Gen Zers who have risen above the challenges placed on them to create a change in the LGBTQ community.
So do we agree with those sentiments? Do we think that that's an apt description?
Absolutely. It depends who you're referring to as agreeing. I've seen firsthand older generations be discriminatory or just be rude to younger generations based on their opinions that differ from their own. And I really don't understand because Gen Zers, I've noticed that we really do take the time to understand other perspectives. And I think that's something that's really positive about our generation is that we're open to other opinions and trying to understand other people's opinions. I think it's because we understand in ourselves what it's like to be discriminated against versus older generations may not have received that because they weren't as out of line as we are, per se. And I really think that that's something that they need to do because we are not the enemy. I don't quite think we're entitled because some of us have really had to struggle to get to the position that we're in.
Yeah, and although I agree with a lot of what you're saying, I think that a lot of people have this notion about Gen Zers, calling us snowflakes or calling us entitled or
like whiny.
You know why?
Sensitive.
I think cancel culture has a lot to do with it, and I don't want to bring that up because that's a whole other spectrum of problems, right? But I do see, things like that. You say that we're open and stuff like that, and I do agree with you on that. But there's also this other side of, people, Gen Zers, who are so much more like, just this lack of understanding, of this lack of letting people grow. And I know that some people don't deserve that. I know some people don't deserve a platform. I know that the people don't, deserve to be deplatformed if they have done something absolutely horrific. But I think that that's something that Gen Z has to work on before we continue talking about how Gen Z is awesome.
No, absolutely.
Definitely understanding that people can grow and change, and especially people who have made mistakes in their lives at our age. We've made plenty of mistakes, but because our life isn't just flashed out in the public, that's
we
why
don't see it.
We don't see it, right? And I feel like that's a big reason why people, boomers or whatever call us, perhaps a bit more sensitive or entitled because of that culture.
I think there's a huge push. And then I see this firsthand as the youngest candidate to ever run for any office here in Broward County or possibly in the state. We still haven't checked that. It's difficult to tell. I'm sure it will be at a local level somewhere in a small county. In one of the 66 counties here in the state of Florida, but more importantly, more like central here to Broward. As a young candidate, I was always told by older people that I should wait my turn. This is not the time for me to get involved. And my response has always been, you can't tell me that someone who's been out of school for 30 or 40 years is making the best decisions on what's happening in our school district, or at least where I have to go to school, and my classmates who I no longer are technically classmates now that I'm in college. You can't tell me that they're the best representation for them. And so the ideas of waiting your turn, the ideas of you don't know what you're talking about because you don't have enough life experience, I think is one that doesn't show a level of collaboration between Gen Z and other generations that might be older. And I was at Kings Point yesterday campaigning, and I remember, two very fond things. The first one is when I said very strongly that anyone that says I'm too young, maybe you're too old. And for anyone, and I said, and for anyone who says 18 is not an old enough age to get into politics, I said, then maybe you should step out of the ring. And I meant that because young people are here to stay. And then I also remember saying that every generation has had their issue. If we're talking about women's suffrage, if we're talking about the civil rights movement, if we're talking about anti-Vietnam protesters, climate change, making sure that women have the right to choose, it's always been headlined by young people. And so now that you're a bit older and you've settled into your life, it doesn't mean that you kick other young people trying to stir up change to the curb. And that was very well received by seniors, which predominantly live in Kings Point. And that's a narrative that I've had to take unnecessarily simply because I'm young. And I think I agree. These are things that Gen Z are dealing with. But more importantly, Gen Z is a strong generation, and we have so many outlets to really, I think, combat those narratives. And I think we've been doing a good job.
And I think if there's if there's one thing that I will stand by, it's that I am never going to, because I've done it so many times, right? Trying to pretend that I'm someone who's older, trying to present as someone who's older, and I've come to terms with, especially over this past year, the way that we've seen youth activists such as myself really show up and show out in regards to the Don't Say Gay or Trans law in particular. The ways in which the power of Gen Z and the power of youth activists, and I've planted my feet. I will never ever again see my youth, as a liability. It will only ever be treated as an asset, and I take that and I take that in stride. I've had people, as an organizer, as a nonprofit leader, people say, well, I've had people tell me, your brain isn't fully developed. I've actually been told that by people, actually by people in and outside of my organization.
Oh my goodness.
Imagine telling your boss your brain isn't fully developed. But
I don't think they realize that as you age, your brain also deteriorates over time.
Yeah.
This is also true, but your brain isn't fully developed. You're naive. You don't have this experience, and what we pride ourselves in Prism is we are not just a youth-serving organization. We are a youth-led organization. No one is going to know how to connect with young people. No one is going to know how to mobilize young people like young people. No one's going to know how young people are engaging with the internet, how they're consuming information like young people who are consuming that information and engaging with it in the same way.
And that's such a good point, because whenever older politicians need young people to show up to their events, they call me. After refusing to endorse my candidacy, to give me a check. But yeah, right. But when they need someone, when they want an intern from high school to work their, you're not wrong, to work their TikTok page or to work their Instagram or to get young people out to their political events for their gain, they call me. And other young people who they've counted out, like my friend Elijah Manley, who's running for State House, and my friend Stephen Meza, who ran for State Senate, who's doing great things in Broward County, by the way. They call us after they told us that we're too young and we should wait our turns. Interesting take. Interesting.
and I get a lot of the same stuff. You put me on youth panels and things like that, and it's where are you gonna make sure that you're showing up when you don't need me to? Right? Are you going to make sure that when I have an initiative that I'm pushing, right, that does not necessarily involve you as a spearhead, you don't get to put your logo on it, are you still going to support it? Are you still going to support youth activism?
Yeah, no, absolutely. They only want to listen to us when we have nothing to say.
Yeah.
Which is it's a very interesting dilemma. But
yeah, I love your point. I love what you said about like politics and kids in politics.
Yeah.
Especially when it's the old people who left us with this mess to deal with and clean up for them, and then they don't let us clean it up.
And they felt the same way when they were our age, and they're doing the same. It's almost like generational trauma.
Yeah.
That they just keep doing the same thing over and over again. When are we going to evolve?
For example, I'll bring up an issue that we have here in the district, and then we can head over to the next story. Broward County has a huge issue with mental health access in our public education system. And it's largely due in part to the underfunding of the departments that are supposed to be handling mental health. Yeah. And this has been a huge cry from the community. I think I just bumped my mic. Man, I'm sorry out there. But it has been a large outcry from our community within our students to have an increase in that. And yet still our school board has remained to have that issue unaddressed. And so you put on a 5-minute video about mindfulness and say that's your response to mental health. Excuse me, I call that bullshit. I think that, students have been asking for an increased access to guidance counselors, to family therapists, to psychiatrists in schools. We have the money to do that, but are we really aligning our interests to those of what young people need and want, or are we ignoring it because they don't know what's best for themselves?
No, I absolutely have to agree with you on that, because I've seen firsthand, like, again, I love this panel because it's things we're currently seeing. And one of those things is the lack of mental health resources. When their first response is to call the police, handcuff them, and send them to a behavioral health center.
Right.
How is that treatment of mental health? How is that
threat assessment?
Exactly. How are you taking care of that person's mental health? You're not. You're making them feel crazier, which they've already feel that way, and that's not okay.
Or, Evan, we wait until they say they want to commit suicide, and
Or
then we
become a
Baker
threat
Act,
to the
and
school.
then we Baker
That's
Act
what
them.
behavioral health centers.
But the signs have been there all along. But now we're concerned.
But yeah, now they are. But the 5-minute mental health videos are totally.
Yeah, we're an A+ school, but at what cost?
right. Interesting irony.
Kids' mental health, but.
LGBTQ plus news is vital for our community and for the broader world as a whole. We have enough enemies at Fox News. Tucker, Sean, and Lara are loud. We need passionate allies. Happening Out Television Network, Queer News Tonight, and It's Happening Out are literally out of the closet and into the headlines. Our community needs your support. Like this broadcast and subscribe now to ensure the growth of the entire LGBTQ plus community.